Thanks very much, everyone. Back in September 2015, whenever Pope Francis announced that Dublin would host the 9th World Meeting of the Families, Irish eyes were smiling all over the world. And they smiled all over again last month whenever it was confirmed that Pope Francis himself would attend the event. My brother Archbishop Dermot Martin of Dublin tells us that it was Pope Francis himself who chose to bring this great gathering to Ireland. Despite challenging times for the Church in Ireland in recent years, family remains very important in the psyche of the Irish people. Family in Ireland is all about connection. It connects you to a home, as we say in the Irish language, to our muintir féin, to our flesh and blood, to the people who are our roots. Family also links us to a community, to a parish, to a county, to a history, a tradition, to our past, our present and our future. And for many people in Ireland, family also connects them to faith and to values, to baptism and to a community of believers. All over the world, there's a huge Irish diaspora. So there are people from the United States, Australia, Britain and beyond who are sharing our joy at hosting the World Meeting in August. And Irish connections also extend to distant continents where the Irish missionary movements have carried the joy of the gospel. So the organising team already are noticing many thousands of people from overseas registering to join us in Dublin in August. And we hope to offer everyone, as we say in Ireland, Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. The theme for the 9th World Meeting, as John has said, is the gospel of the family, joy for the world, a theme which was chosen by Pope Francis himself. And it is a joy-filled message which is at the heart of Amoris Laetitia. In fact, this is the first World Meeting since the two synods on the family and since the publication of Amoris Laetitia. So the meeting will give us an opportunity, really, to come together from all over the world to reflect on key aspects of the joy of love. And we will do so out of the conviction that the Church's teaching on the family is not a problem to be solved, but is a gift for the world, a message that is positive, liberating, and humanizing. So we want to communicate a clear and positive vision of the family. And that is very much distilled for us in Amoris Laetitia. It has its origins in the creation of humanity in the image of God. And of course, you can trace it from sacred scripture through church tradition in the teachings of the magisterium that family is central to who we are. And Pope Francis, I love the way he keeps reminding us that when God wanted to save the world, he sent his Son into the middle of a human family, which was open to receiving him in love. So the Church's proclamation about family, which is founded on a faithful relationship between a man and a woman, open to the gift of children as the fruit of that love, we believe that is good news for society and for the world. But there's no getting away from the fact that communicating the family in this way can appear increasingly countercultural in many parts of the world and also in Ireland. And this is accelerated, I think, by the departure in public discourse from the philosophical and anthropological underpinning of the message of family and marriage in natural law, and the whole erosion of social supports for the traditional understanding of marriage in positive legislation. If you think about it, how difficult it must be for young people today who are preparing for marriage to hear the voice of faith amidst all of the other messages that are being communicated to them by the secular world. They're so easily drawn towards an overly emotional and romantic concept of love and marriage, which, as the joy of the gospel says, can be constructed and modified at will. There's also a lot of pressure on young people today to resist becoming tied down by commitments, relationships, or attachments, to try to avoid lifelong commitments, including marriage or having children, for as long as possible. Employers also expect our young people to be very flexible, movable, able to travel and work long on social hours. So our young people are, on the one hand, surrounded by a contraceptive anti-birth mentality with increasing indifference to abortion. And then, on the other hand, they're offered a technocratic commodification of childbearing, which, if necessary, can be accessed independently of any sexual relationship. So into this rather soulless world, we have the joy and the challenge of communicating a clear and positive vision of marriage and the family. The good news that human life is sacred, that each human being comes from God, who created us, male and female, that we are willed by God. God loves each and every one of us. Self-giving love and commitment in marriage of a man and a woman open to life is not only possible, but is a beautiful and fulfilling gift. And with the power of God's grace, it is achievable. Chastity is achievable. It is healthy and good for our young people. The giving of oneself to another in marriage for life is special, rewarding, and a wonderful symbol of Christ's forgiving, faithful love for his church. Now, all of that can be rather strange in today's world. The phrase, "what God joins together," should really be an exclamation of hope in the midst of a world that is sometimes shallow and fickle. We proclaim the gospel of the family because we believe in it, and we also believe that with the help of God, it is attainable. Pope Francis put it powerfully himself when he said, "The Church, with a renewed sense of responsibility, continues to propose marriage in its essentials: offspring, good of the couple, unity, indissolubility, sacramentality." And that's not just an ideal for the few, but it is a reality that with the grace of Christ can be experienced by all the baptized faithful. Now, it's one thing to have a joyful message to proclaim and propose like that. It's another thing to find effective ways of communicating this message. If no one's listening, it's very difficult to communicate. For a while, I thought that the task of proclaiming the gospel of the family in the church was primarily up to me as a priest, as a bishop. But I've become more and more convinced that the church's vision of family is best communicated by families and in families to families. At the 2015 Synod on the Family, I learned that the family is not simply the object of ministry and evangelization, but the family itself is a powerful agent of evangelization. It is the school of humanity. It is the domestic church. It's in the family that values are transmitted. The wisdom of generations is passed on. It's in the family that choices between right and wrong are evaluated. Connections with the past are made. Links with other families are upheld. It's in the family where we first learn to love and where we are first loved. It's in the family that we discover who we are, where we've come from, our intergenerational relationships, our links with a place, with a land, with a worshipping community, our rootedness in a culture and in a language. At the synods, we heard about movements, associations, basic Christian communities, and many other networks which are guiding and nourishing the vocation of marriage and the family. So at the World Meeting in Dublin, we'll have another opportunity to celebrate, communicate, and share these initiatives with others. I think any strategy for communicating the family has to begin with the conviction that it is primarily families who minister to other families, married couples who minister to other married couples. If you take, for example, the importance of prayer in the family. If you want to support families with prayer, the best thing to do is to look to other families, to look to family associations and groups and movements which have been established by and for families. And I've come across so many examples of this in my life as a priest and a bishop. Groups like the Neo-Catechumenal Way, Syro-Malabar communities who are very strong on the importance of family catechesis for children and young people. In Ireland, and I think all over the world now, we have the Catholic Grandparents Association, Retrovile, Accord in Ireland, Marriage Encounter, Couples for Christ. There are many, many groups who have shown us how to live the vocation of marriage and family. I think it's very important, though, for the church to consider what are the points of contact with daily reality of family life. Where do we connect with families? In addition, of course, to the many contacts we have with individuals who are all members of families. I recently asked the priests and pastoral workers in my diocese to tell me, where do you meet families? And the sorts of examples they gave were, of course, preparation and celebration of the sacraments, like baptism, First Holy Communion, First Confession, confirmation, preparation for marriage. All of these are opportunities to affirm, celebrate, and teach the Church's vision about the family. In Ireland, also, customs and rituals surrounding death. They're very strong in Ireland, including the traditional wake, where the body is brought back to the family home before the funeral. These are all very powerful opportunities for the Church to meet with and accompany families and touch their lives with the love and mercy of God. One of the most moving gatherings for us in the Church in Ireland is an annual ceremony where we bless graves. Families, they travel from all over to be at their family graves, and we have a mass or a blessing service. And it's another grace-filled opportunity to teach and communicate the vision of love in family life. The team which is working in preparation for World Meeting of the Families have been preparing resources to support all these moments of grace. We have a specially composed, very beautiful prayer for World Meeting of the Families in all the different languages. It's on the website. We have a beautiful hymn. And we also have a whole series of practical parish initiatives for families. Moments like New Year's Day, for example, Christmas, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day even, where we could communicate powerful messages from Amoris Laetitia. And they're supported by many online resources, animations, studio discussions and interviews. And all of these are available on the WMOF 2018 website. Last Christmas, for example, we distributed tens of thousands of copies of this little icon card as a Christmas card to families. On the back of it was the prayer for the World Meeting of the Families. Every child who's baptized this year in Ireland gets a special certificate that you were baptized during the World Meeting of the Families. The same for couples getting married. For children preparing for First Communion, we've a little toy cube with little sentences or words and phrases from Amoris Laetitia which they can roll and families can discuss and talk about. All our confirmation candidates this year are being challenged to show acts of kindness in their family and then to go online and log their acts of kindness. We hope to give them to Pope Francis. 100,000 acts of kindness carried out by the confirmation children of Ireland this year. Our development agency, Croce, it's calling upon parishes to take on what we call the Romero Award. It's inspired, of course, by Blessed Oscar Romero and his concern for the poor and the oppressed. And it's awarded to families and others who can show that they have highlighted some form of injustice in our world, trying to get families and communities to think and act more justly. This Easter time, we've been encouraging families to rekindle the practice of blessing their homes, to take home some Easter water from a big barrel outside the church and sprinkle it around the rooms of their homes or on the graves of their loved ones, to remind them of their baptism into the family of God's church. We're also, of course, during May, trying to rekindle the age-old custom of the May altar in family homes and in schools. At Pentecost, we're going to encourage our families, our parishes, to conduct a parish audit of how does our parish engage with the diversity of family types in our midst. It invites parishes to come up with ideas on how they can become more welcoming, more supportive, and more inclusive of families. Of course, in Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis encourages the faithful to really engage and reflect on the themes within that exhortation. So we have a parish program called Amoris. Let's talk family. Let's be family. It's a 6-session parish conversation which explores some of the key messages in Amoris Laetitia, Evangelii Gaudium, Laudato Si, and it uses ICT, video, audio messages, testimonies to really get families just to talk about what it means to be family, what it means to be a Catholic family nowadays. Now, at the synods, of course, we were encouraged as bishops and as shepherds to try to accompany families in all of the challenges of today. I was very moved at the synod to hear bishops and others speak about forced migration, persecution and war, and how it affects families in the world, about human trafficking, the exploitation of women and children. We heard about wombs for hire, about child soldiers, forced prostitution, the exploitation of street children in the cities of the world. We shuddered at the prevalence of domestic violence, abuse in homes. We really thought about the challenges that face families: polygamy, mixed marriages, interfaith marriages, the pressures on families from individualism, from the spread of abortion, euthanasia, gender ideology, the reality that the majority of marriages taking place in our world are happening without any reference to faith or to God. At the same time, there are many families in our world who are doing their very best in very complex situations to try to persevere, to grow in love, and to generously witness to commitment, forgiveness, and lifelong faithfulness. And the overwhelming sense I found at the synods was a desire to be with families wherever they are, especially those whose homes are visited by tragedy or violence or abuse or whatever, or breakdown in their relationships. The synods and Amoris Laetitia are clear that we need to be mindful of those who have begun new relationships and unions. And we have to try to find sincere and truthful ways of welcoming and including them in the life and worshipping community of the church. What do we do in these situations? Do we just sit outside and judge? Or do we try to accompany all our people, presenting the truth and the joy of the gospel of the family in a loving and charitable way? I hope and pray that the World Meeting of the Families will give us more opportunities to reflect on how we can propose pastorally to these situations the Christian message of truth and mercy which converges in Christ. We all have a responsibility to really reach out to all families. And how do we do that nowadays? It's not easy, particularly in Ireland. It's 40 years since a Pope last visited Ireland. And in that time, the context for faith and church in Ireland has changed dramatically. The whole role of religion and faith in Irish society, both north and south, has been hugely impacted by secularization, a big decline in church attendance and vocations to the priesthood and religious life. Like other parts of Europe, we in Ireland are facing the situation that many of our people are living their lives without very much reference to God at all. We're very steadily moving from a society in which it was once virtually impossible not to believe in God to one in which now faith is considered as perhaps just one human possibility among others. And there are ongoing calls in Ireland for the removal of the Church's perceived remaining influence in schools, healthcare and public policy making. Of course, we've had the terrible child abuse scandals. And in the aftermath of these, to try to communicate the family to those who feel they can no longer trust us because they feel hurt and betrayed in their families by their experience of church, that is a real challenge. The sins and the crimes of sexual abuse in the church have not only had tragic consequences in the lives of victims and their families, but they have also, as Pope Benedict told us, obscured the light of the gospel. So it's in this very complex and often negative environment that we have to find new ways of communicating our sincerely held perspectives about family and other matters. And now we have to do so alongside those of other faiths and those of no faith. We have to try to encourage conversations at a national level on the challenges and opportunities for family life. Recently, the President of Ireland conducted an ethics initiative asking, what does Irish society need in terms of ethics? And he came up with the suggestion that we need a debate about what ethical values and principles we want to uphold and strengthen. We have to have conversations about what constitutes a good life or a flourishing life, not just for individuals, but also for families and for communities. When we go into this kind of dialogue, we have to be careful. We have to be cautious about thinking that people who disagree with us are always hostile. Bishop Donal Murray, one of our emeritus bishops, says, civilized discussion should begin from the presumption that all concerned are honestly seeking the truth. We should remain open to recognizing elements of truth that are present in the convictions of someone who disagrees with us, and we disagree with them. Honest convictions are the fruit of a search for truth and for God, the search in which those on both sides of the argument are involved. I noticed recently the French bishops making similar points. They said, many of our fellow citizens, some out of confusion, wonder, who am I really? What do I believe in? What are the values which made me? And what are the values that matter to me? And where do they come from? What I was interested in about the French bishop's statement was that they say they are speaking not simply as people of faith, but also as fellow French citizens, pastorally accompanying their troubled people with empathy and concern. The French bishops caution against any aspiring to be a church of the pure, a counterculture removed from society, posing like a judge from above. I believe that the engagement of people of faith, together with all people of goodwill, in conversations about family, marriage, and other critical life matters, is to be encouraged and welcomed. We can draw upon a rich social teaching, and we can ask uncomfortable questions. We can respectfully challenge those who are engaging in political, social, and legal practices. To what extent is public policy supporting family and life? You remember the great 1983 Charter of the Rights of the Family. It's reasonable for us to say, does public policy today support freedom of education and conscience? Does it support a proper work-life balance which respects the role of mothers and fathers? What do our economic and social policies say to poorer families, particularly those policies which impact directly on family and on the needs of children and the elderly? How can we tackle the proliferation of drugs, alcohol, gambling, and other addictive behaviours which destroy home and family life? How do our welfare policies and our benefit programmes support families who are most in need and who are so easily targeted and exploited by criminal elements and loan sharks? How can we better assist young people who wish to establish a family, try to get a mortgage for their home, take out insurance, but who are sometimes convinced by economic policies to remain single? So I believe we have to find a constructive culture of engagement in order to communicate the family. There's no point, I think, in a pointless culture war. It's much better to try to ensure that the voice of faith can be heard in the midst of a cacophony of other voices in the world. And that begins with a conviction that there are many types of family out there, but the Church's vision of the uniqueness of the faithful and exclusive union of a married man and woman and their children is beautiful and precious. It's not simply for the privacy of our churches and homes. We want to shout it out. It's a gospel of the family. It's meant for mission. Pope Francis keeps saying the family deserves special attention by those responsible for the common good because it's the basic unit of society. It brings strong links of union that underpin human existence, and with the generation and education of children, ensures the renewal and the future of society. I remember at the Synod it being put really strongly, a society that neglects the family has lost its access to the future. So I hope that the World Meeting of the Families will give us a privileged opportunity to communicate the gospel of the family both ad intra and also ad extra as something that is good for society, good for the church, and joy for the world. Thank you.